I suppose. So business travel will never return, fact or fiction. Most of us in the room are probably based in regions or areas where we've seen return to 2019 levels of business. Some of us might not be because there are inconsistencies in terms of the return of overall demand, but there's also differences between the segments. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on today, zoning particularly and on business travel. We're also seeing changes in buying behavior and travel behavior. The last few years have seen a seismic shift in the way that corporate companies collaborate and communicate. And the question is, has that led to a permanent reduction in business travel or not? And so those are the questions we want to explore today. I have a powerhouse of a panel, real high-energy people to help you fight that post-lunch slide. So let me introduce them. And you know what, I'm going to apologize to the panel because I heard Gemma making introductions this morning about her panel, or one of the other sessions panels, and she gave such awesome introductions about people and their bios. I have name, job title, and company. So guys, I'm sorry. Should have let Gemma do the introductions. Note to self for next time. But anyway, let me introduce the panel and welcome to the stage. We have Yaqub Khan, who's the Regional Procurement Manager, MENA and Pakistan from Abbott Laboratories. We've got Christy White, who's the Chief Product Officer from Noland. We've Titus Hanke, who's the Senior Commercial Director, Arabian Peninsula and Turkey from Hilton. We've got Ryan Morris, who's the Director of Regional Sales, IMEA from IHG. And last but by no means least, we have Cem Çetin-Türk, who's the VP, Middle East, Africa and Turkey from Amadeus Hospitality. So some fascinating data there, and still a mix of performance, some really strong performances coming through from Dubai, particularly from the Saudi cities, pretty much since April, May time, ahead of 2019, blip for Hajj. But I'd like to get some insight into your verticals. So in terms of how do you explain the variance between those cities? What's the cause behind the effect that we're seeing? Why do we have three incredibly strong Gulf cities, one not so much, Cairo not so much? So Titus, maybe we can start with you. What do you think's happening in those Gulf cities that's driving that impact?
So I think of all cities, Cairo is probably behaving the most organically, you know, a bit of up and down, but I think it's a natural and slow-paced growth. I think it's the other cities that are the anomalies, right? You look at Riyadh with the not-so-humble investment obviously happening in Saudi, seat of the government, and a lot of consultancy business in Riyadh. Riyadh is just flying, right? And you know, Jeddah to some extent, but Riyadh a lot more. And as we said, Dubai, it's similar, right? The city is full. I don't know if anyone was on Sheikh Zayed this morning, but it takes 45 minutes to get here from the marina. City is busy, right? And I think that reflects nicely with the corporates. The business is back. That is the clear observation here. And some markets will still take longer. I think here we also have the advantage of, you know, the general accessibility and the flights and everything comes and meets here, a bit like we're doing right today. And yeah, so I think it looks pretty much like what we see in Hilton as well.
Sticking with the hoteliers, Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, we've got some contra-indicators to the data we saw there. But if you look at Dubai, there's some geopolitical areas at play here as well. We've had a windfall here with what's happened in Europe, and you can see it in travel, but you can also see it in general living in Dubai. Rent prices are up, as you say, it's busy. However, for us, it fills our restaurants. It's a good thing. And you know, Egypt is an interesting one because we're seeing some of the sectors in Egypt really booming. And with some of the work they're doing there in their infrastructure, we're actually seeing quite a good indicator in Egypt, and it's a market that we're really happy with.
Okay.
So, you know, it's quite interesting how they track their data in Egypt probably, but it is a bit of a contra-indicator.
Yeah. And Yaqub, I mean, you can't maybe necessarily comment so much on that data because it's very hospitality specific, but from Abbott's perspective, are you seeing some regions of Abbott that are ramping up in business travel faster than others?
Yeah. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So very good afternoon, all present here. So the CHAMPS data, what was shown on top, I would say I would partly agree with this data because the corporate data shown is, I'm sure it's mix of different organizations, oil and gas industry, pharmaceutical industry, banking, FMCG, FMCD, right? So when it comes to pharmaceuticals, Dubai is the regional office. So obviously the data would be right because we have majority of the business coming to Dubai. The second highest city for us is Riyadh. So again, but I do not agree with the Abu Dhabi and the data which is shown for Doha. Obviously that will be more related to oil and gas industry, yeah? And I always like to talk with numbers. So if you see our spend data in 2019 for Middle East, we were spending approximately $7.5 million across airline and hotel. This spend came down to $1.3 million in 2020.
Wow.
It went back to $1.5 million in 2021. And 2022, when we started our full-fledged travel since last September, we are already seeing a spend of $3.5 million. So this clearly shows that for last 2 years, we have not traveled. We are just ramping up faster. In entire Middle East, yes, the travel is back to normal, except for Russia and CIS in the European region. All other countries are traveling. So that's the overall perspective about the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. Thanks, Jakob. Christy,
Yes.
from a meetings and events point of view, what are you seeing in terms of the performance of different regions and the pace of recovery from an M&E point of view?
Well, I will first say that it's a pleasure to talk about this, about the Middle East, because typically when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about really bad numbers. The Middle East has recovered at about 150%, just shy of 150% of 2019 levels overall. Now, when you break that down into the segmentation, corporate does come down. So rather than being almost 150% recovered, corporate, I'm sad to say, is only at 126% recovered. But when you compare that to Asia Pacific or to the United States, their numbers are roughly 30% lower than that. The US year to date is recovered at about 70%, and Asia Pacific is recovered at just shy of 59%. So it is totally different stories. Now, if I look at APAC and the US just over the last 5 months, their numbers come up to almost just shy of 90% for the US and right at 80% for APAC. So they're recovering faster. But this region, other than a brief period right at the beginning of the year, January, February, you saw Omicron cause a little bit of a dip, and then from there on, it was straight up.
Super. Okay. And is there any other trends that you're seeing that are specific to either your respective hospitality businesses or Christy, Jakob, the businesses that you work in? I mean, Jakob, any other trends that you're seeing in terms of the return to business travel with Abbott?
Yes, we are back to meetings face-to-face, internal, external, all of them. The recent trends, what we have seen is the increase in the prices. So the hotel rates have gone up, the airline rates have gone up, there's tough competition. So this is a new trend for us. So we have a cost, to manage. So we have a budget for travel. So to give you an example, if we're having 3 travels for an employee to travel to a next country, to manage that cost, since the price have gone up, instead of traveling for 3, the person might end up traveling for only 2 business trips. So
less trips.
So less trips, but then the spend is same. So
right.
This is what we're seeing.
Because
I think this might be because last 2 years, the hotel and airline industries have not done very well. So they want to slightly cover up for whatever losses they have made, so it makes sense.
Those mean hoteliers putting up the rates, eh?
Yeah.
Ryan, how about you?
The lead time, though, right?
Sorry, Titus,
Our
go
lead
ahead.
time is up again. Because
Yeah.
especially in Dubai, we always have this thing about lead time is getting shorter, and actually for the corporates, it's getting longer again because you can't find a room within 3 days of arrival,
Availability
right?
is
So
becoming a...
bit of collateral benefit.
Yeah.
And the average length of stay has obviously got longer
it's
as
also
well.
longer,
yeah.
Because, as you say, traveling less but staying longer to make a more effective stay, right?
That's correct.
Mm. in order to maintain the productivity of the trip.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Titus, any other trends that you're seeing either that resonate with what Jakob's saying or any of the other buyers that you talk to in the market?
I think there's a strong differentiation between the verticals that the corporate travelers work in, right? I mean, pharmaceutical is very different from the consultancy business, and the consultancies are running at 100 miles an hour, I think, and especially when we see Riyadh, but also Dubai, it's really back to normal, and I think not every sector has that. Local negotiated rates and the local corporate market is following a slightly slower trajectory, but all the consultancies are really, really back on the road, literally speaking, as we just said, right? So that is something to see. And then work from home, I think, is one of those things that often comes up, right? And everyone's worried. The general managers ask me, like, are they all working from home now? Would they still come to our hotels? And we feel that, yes, I think people are working from home still 1 or 2 days a week if they can. But again, to the consultancies, they're on the road 90% of their work life, right? So the 1 day of the month they can stay at home, probably they will. But that doesn't mean they would have traveled had they not stayed at home, right? So it's just more of a comfort choice, I would say. But,
yeah. Okay.
I think...
I want to, go ahead.
Ladies first.
I just wanted to add on to that, because it's interesting that you said that pharma from you and consulting from you are the two of the ones that are returning so quickly, because oddly, they're in the top 10 group segments for the Middle East. They're also two of the least recovered from a group perspective in that. So it's interesting to see that from a BT perspective, they're out there gangbusters doing, you know, on seats in a plane and all of that, but we're not seeing that from a group perspective.
And who are the stronger segments from a...
I'm sorry?
Who are the stronger industry segments from a group perspective?
If you hadn't asked
Sorry,
me, trading and education is starting to pick up. Come to my session right after this and I'll have all of that. But I mean, all the segments are recovered over 100% except for those two.
Right,
and
okay.
there are three. Oil and gas is the other one that has not recovered from a group perspective. But the other top 10 are all above 100%. Interestingly, the top 10 in this region represents just shy of 76% of the overall corporate business in group, but now they represent 63%.
Wow.
So it's a fairly significant gap, which is different than what we're seeing in other regions of the world. And you now have these new segments like marketing and advertising that are starting to pick up and sort of usurp some of those positions. So, you know, interesting places to shop for business.
Yeah. Ryan, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on your comment on cost of travel. It's a very fair comment. You know, we obviously look into it with a lot of depth, and the cost to do business has actually increased a lot. The cost of energy, you know, retaining and recruiting talent, that type of thing. And it's really incumbent on us to be very transparent as to that to all our customers, so that we're all making informed decisions as to, you know, what we want to do with our programs and what we want to offer our customers. But the cost of doing business is definitely ramping up, especially again with what's going on in Europe and that type of thing. So that transparency, I think, is critical when we deal with each other, so that we all know we're making informed decisions as to what's going on in the market.
Can we build on that for just a second? Because
Please.
I would add a secondary component to it is, I think there is the cost of business that we're going to need to factor in, but I also think there's a human capital component that we need to build in, because you are taking people, you know, everyone in this room is probably I know everyone sitting on this panel, we're all road warriors. And before the pandemic, if my CEO had come to me on Thursday and said, hey, I need you in Paris on Monday, I'd have been like, I'm packing right now. And now I'd be like, is it just the one meeting? I mean, could we do it on Zoom? And it's a difference. We had those 2 years at home and time with our families, and now we make different personal life choices. And I'm not willing to get on a plane for a 2-hour meeting that's a 12-hour trip away. So now we're looking at it also from the cost and saying, okay, I'm willing to make that trip from a human capital perspective, but we're gonna need to pick up 3 or 4 other meetings, because now from a cost perspective, we're making the ROI better, and from a human capital perspective and my mental well-being, we're making decisions better. And I think that's going to factor into BT for a very long time.
And that's an interesting behavioral change. I mean, we talk a lot about business travel management, which is kind of from the perspective of us as suppliers and our partners as buyers. But to bring in the actual business traveler and think about how his or her behavior has changed and how his or her attitude to business travel has changed is an interesting perspective. And the thing about the productivity then of the trip links to what you were saying, Jakob and Ryan, about, okay, I'm going to make less trips, but if I am going to make a trip, I'm going to make sure it's productive.
Yes.
We do see the road warriors like Christy working very hard on the weekends, especially here in Dubai and also in RAK. So there's a lot of that bleisure business, right, which is a term I think invented in this part of the world, where the corporate rates get booked on the Saturdays and Sundays. It's amazing. So thanks for the hard work on the weekends as well.
You're welcome. Yes.
So Amex actually bought, for all of you in the room, Amex recently bought out an interesting paper on, it's no longer a procurement or travel manager, it's now the chief travel officer. And they talk about all the reasons, especially the human capital piece, that, to attract talent and to keep talent, what Amex thinks you should do. So it's worth, those of you in the room that haven't touched on that, just have a look at it. Quite interesting reading.
And let's come back to that in a sec, the whole work from home, human capital thing. One other thing before we park the data was just the regional economics. I mean, we're fortunate to be, most of us, to be living in a region where we've had a high oil price for a while now. We've got a number of our currencies are pegged to the dollar, which is trading high now. Government budgets are generally operating at a surplus, which is good for infrastructure projects, which brings consultants and IT companies and, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a factor as well, right? Particularly in some of the cities that we saw performing, those regional hubs, Jeddah, Riyadh, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, maybe slightly further behind in the recovery, but probably following fairly hot on the heels.
I would totally agree with that.
I agree.
I came to this region in 2016, and arguably 2016, 2017, 2018, our ADRs were going backwards because the oil price was low, people didn't have the money to spend. And now we see the opposite, all these infrastructure projects, that are happening, and also, cities like Dubai really deeply investing in what they see their future being. So I do believe that surplus is driving the economy to a large degree.
Okay. I'd like to explore with you the internal business travel and external business travel dynamic, and just get your thoughts about, is there a difference? Are you seeing a difference either from a supply side, M&E side, buyer side, in terms of the pace of recovery for internal, non-customer facing, non-revenue generating business travel versus external revenue generating, etc.? Jakob, let's come to you first for a buyer's perspective. Are you seeing anything like that at ABBA? Any difference between internal and external?
To give you the prospect about our entire spend, we spend around 70% of the total spend on meeting our external customers and 30% on the internal travel. But since we have resumed back after pandemic, we have not done much of external travel. It's more of internal. For last 2.5 years, we had no kickoff meetings, no sales conferences, no summits, no review meetings. So people are so excited that they are back to normal. We can have face-to-face meetings. So we are all planning all these kickoff meetings. We also have a group next month going to Doha. That's our kickoff meeting happening there for 210 packs. We have many other kickoff meetings lined up in various countries. So in last 3 months to next 6 months, I would say we would be spending more on internal travel compared to external travel. And I think from next year onwards, there will be more full-fledged external travels as well. That is meeting customers face-to-face. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Christy, anything you're seeing in M&E?
So we're seeing two things. We are beginning to see more internal meetings that are designated as that. It's not that like a sales kickoff or different things like that. But we're also seeing meetings where people have been allowed to move other places, but they work for a corporate office and they're being brought in for those back-to-back, face-to-face meetings. The second thing that we're seeing, and this is more from an external meeting, is where companies are choosing to do something they may have done one big event, and now they're doing the same event, but in 3 locations in much smaller events. Ironically, this is something that we have seen after every economic downturn this century. I can honestly say that because I examined the data. We saw it at TravelClick as well in those when I was in my time there, where you, right after the downturn, you get these smaller meetings, but it's 3 or 4 of them, and then you begin to see the numbers kicking back up. You know, we use 2019 as our baseline for the health, but in reality, 2012 or 2013 was actually the peak for meetings, and it's because of that concept. It's coming out of the dot-com bust. Everybody was doing much smaller meetings regionally, and then somewhere around 2014, all of those meetings got combined to bigger meetings, which means fewer meetings, but it meant one lucky hotel got a much larger and got a lot more revenue than those other 3 hotels did. And we're seeing that trend right now. So you got to figure we're a couple of years away from beginning to see that contract back into one event.
Okay, interesting. I want to pick up on the point that Jakob made about, you know, Abbott is seeing a short-term spike in internal business travel. And Ryan, I'm going to come to you. What are your thoughts about, you know, internal business travel? Are you getting any feedback from buyers about the extent to which that is valued? Is there particular internal business travel or meetings and events that are taking place or are seen as having more value than others?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Let's be honest. Essential business travel never went away, right? So when we could fly, travel was happening. I think if we're all in the room, look at our own businesses, we're trying to find a way to engage our people. We're all trying to find a way to engage people because the dynamic changed a bit. We put hybrid, flexible working solutions in. And, you know, we're now trying to get people to really get behind what the objectives are, our goals, that type of thing. It actually came to life for me the other day. We were in a really compelling workshop. And yeah, there was some really good debate, great activity, good chat. And I looked around the room, and half the room were on their phones. And I was like, okay, this is a great...
just checking.
Yeah, we're just looking. Yeah.
this is a great conversation. What's happening when people are at home and their cameras are off? And what's actually going on, right? So,
and what are they wearing?
I don't want to know.
Yeah, sorry, time.
And you know, it also made me think about, okay, how do we help our customers? And I think it's incumbent on us as a supply chain to help customers find those solutions where they are still in that hiatus of moving from mainly hybrid to a more face-to-face environment. Our figures are showing more and more people, to your point, are coming in and doing face-to-face meetings. I'm sure all of us are in the middle of budgets and strategy meetings at the moment. Those would be so much more effective when you're face-to-face, right, than when you're trying to do it over video. The final thing I'd say is it's quite interesting asking customers the question, and they are all at that place where, okay, how do we engage our people? How do we bring people back into the office? How do we get them to come on this journey with what we need to deliver for the company?
Which you talk about coming back to the office, and that's come up a couple of times. Different panelists have mentioned work from home dynamics. I was in India last week, and there was a lot of discussion around some of the companies there with big campuses who are downsizing and releasing real estate. You know, how do we think this whole work from home evolution, and you know, there was a massive shift towards work from home, and now I feel like there's a bit of a counterwave. You know, certainly you hear in the media a bit more discussion about companies wanting to drive people back to the office or hybrid models. But how do we think that's going to impact business travel? Titus, let me come to you on that.
Yeah, I think if you look at a bit of controversial maybe, but some of the tech companies, right, that haven't had the best of times, I think people would probably at some point prefer to work from the office than not work at all. You know, Elon Musk being very controversial there about his work from home policies recently. But in general, I think it is industry specific. we are in hospitality. We're sitting here, and I think everyone's enjoying being here in person as opposed to sitting in front of their laptop, even though that laptop would be in front of their couch in the living room, but it is just so much nicer to be together. And companies that have a healthy P&L will do that more. And whether you work from home or not really doesn't matter so much, right? You can work from home and still come to meet. I don't think that, like I said earlier, I don't think it contradicts each other or it conflicts, because you are able to work from home, but you go to meetings when you have the chance to connect. And I think that's very industry specific. If you look at our clients in the consultancies again, the client says, I need you here to work from this office for the next 6 months. There's no discussion about work from home. Like, this is like, I pay you to be here. So I think company internal and external, clearly different. But again, I don't think that work from home is necessarily a problematic topic or argument. It's just an evolution, like you said, and some industries will be more open to maintaining that, and others will slowly go back to, it's nicer to be in the office together, but if you need a day or two, you know, rather than that I lose you as an employee to a competitor, I'll be flexible, right? That's how I would see it.
Okay, so these changes that we're hearing about, you know, change in traveler behavior, you know, do I really want to be away from home for that short period? Thoughts about making sure that if I'm going to take a trip, it's productive. Fewer trips, longer length of stay. Are any of these things starting to translate into changes in buying policy or travel policy within companies? I mean, Titus, are you, with the buyers that you speak to, are you hearing anything?
I think the RFP process is still the guiding principle of cost management on the buyer side. But like we said earlier, a bit longer stay, connecting trips, making more use of the still reduced T&E budgets that many of our clients still have. And again, depends by the vertical that they operate in, or others are a bit more indifferent. I think in some industries we're way back to 19 levels. In the group space with Hilton, we have more business on the books forward-facing than we had same time 2019. So that's healthy metrics. But I think, yeah, it does vary, I guess. There's no real black or white to this.
Okay. And Jakob, buyer's perspective at Abbott, have you made any policy changes in the last 12, 18 months?
No, we have not made any policy changes, but we are working towards obtaining new technology to reduce the time consumed for global RFPs for the hotels, for the airlines. We are pushing employees wherever they can travel by cars, you know, if it's possible, to avoid airline travel, so we can save on cost. We are also supporting the use of electric cars, you know, for a global fleet. So we are coming with a lot of new technologies. So it's not a mandatory policy, but we are encouraging or emphasizing employees to do. And if everybody starts following, then probably we might put this in the policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Christy, anything from an M&E point of view? You seeing differences in buyer behavior?
No, I mean, we're still seeing relatively short booking windows, even for larger events. I don't think this region is seeing it as much as other parts of the world, but I think the constraint that you're seeing here, because the city is so busy, has taken care of that little issue. The rest of the world, because there is still space, ballroom space standing empty 60 days out, so it's very easy to come in and book a 250-person event. But that puts pressure on the sales teams to be able to turn that for the hotel to even be able to service that event. That'll work itself out next year, because again, we'll start to hit constraint. Where my concern probably lies is more in, do we burn out our staffs before we reach that particular point, and then begin to create an additional staffing component long term. You know, we saw during COVID, I personally had friends who left the hospitality industry, like left the hospitality industry, and I would have told you this is what they were going to do until the day they retired. And you know, one is now works for Big Pharma, another one is, believe it or not, is selling concrete, and they may work as hard as they worked in hotels, but they're making twice as much money. So that's where my concern comes in.
Can I get a number?
I know. You know, there have been a couple of times I'm like, so are you hiring? Because, you know, I worked in sales for a really long time. But, you know, as an industry, I think we are going to have to address that, because it's going to become a bigger problem, whether that's a compensation component or better scheduling ourselves so that we're not burning out our best employees.
It's a war for talent, and we've got to compete. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Jakob, you mentioned, you brought up the CO2 thing. You mentioned the shift to electric cars. And so I want to jump in on that because we talk a lot about cost management when it comes to business travel, but what about other impacts? You know, we've just had COP27 in our region in Sharm el Sheikh, so it's very topical. So is carbon emissions, is that a factor in business travel these days? And is it impacting policy, or you know, is it still just a discussion point? I'm going to, Ryan, bring you in on that one first. What are you hearing from your customers, and how is your business responding to that?
It's definitely impacting policy, absolutely. IHG did a global survey. 83% of the respondents said they would rather stay with brands that are practicing good, sustainable practices. And you know, if you look at some of the stakeholders within the industry, you know, the OTAs and the search engines, they've all got certifications and listings. You know, when we look at our customers, the RFPs are now quizzing our hotels in depth about their sustainable agenda. 90% of IHG's top customers have got sustainable programs in place with real goals. And even online booking tools have now got sustainability you know, markers within the online booking tool. We use, our vehicle is Journey to Tomorrow, and it's a very direct approach as to how we will affect social and environmental change. Talking about carbon footprints, one of them, but we're also talking about investing in communities. We're talking about managing waste. We're talking about how we manage water. Water is becoming a problem in the future. And you know, our CEO is very, very focused on it. And you talked about COP27. He's actually very vocal in those areas. I think the long and short of it is it's definitely on the agenda. It's no longer something we talk about. It's something we do something about.
Okay. And Jakob, buyer's perspective at Abbott, where is it? Where's it feature in your
To
day-to-day?
give you an overview about Abbott's sustainability program, so Abbott being a corporate social responsible organization, we have a 2030 sustainability plan in various categories, right? CO2 is one of them, and working towards sustainability is one of our core values at Abbott. So if I take the total carbon emission from all our manufacturing units, from business travel, etc., from the fleet, so our business travel only contributes to 2% of the total carbon emission from all the carbon emission we are responsible for. So what we are doing these days is airlines, we emphasize airlines to use a clause in the contract which says SAF. SAF is nothing but it's sustainable aviation fuel, which is any fuel made out of other than oil. So this is one thing. By doing this, what we say is we can help manage or reduce the carbon footprint when it comes to the airline or to our business travel. But again, business travel is not the #1 priority for us because just 2%, but wherever possible we are doing this. When it's coming to fleet, yes, we are changing or diverting or trying to start the policy where we can use electric cars, especially in Europe. It's possible due to the infrastructure. But when you come to Middle East region, I think in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, yes, it's possible. We have some places where you have the infrastructure to charge your electric cars. And secondly, again, it's beating around the bush. You know, it's again comes to the cost. So the cost of owning an electric vehicle in this part of the world is much expensive if you compare it to European region or or US, or you go to Asia Pacific region. So considering all those aspects, we are trying whatever best, but yes, sustainability is on our top priority, and we'll make sure that we will contribute to the environment and we will help whatever possible to reduce the carbon footprints.
Okay, all right. Christy, M&E, is carbon emissions something that's important to conference and event buyers?
You know, what we're hearing more of, and we're just in the process of collating all the data from our annual meeting planner thing, is they are contemplating it in meetings. You get it, it's regionally in the United States, where the West Coast, they've had that for years, but it's starting to spread throughout the country. Being here has been very refreshing to see glass bottles and not plastic bottles. And I was watching the news, I think Monday, and they were talking about how Dubai has reduced single-use plastic bags by 500,000 bags a day, and that's a phenomenal thing to watch. An interesting thing that we're hearing from meeting planners is they're pushing it into their own agendas. So think about the swag bag that you get when you go to internal things, that everything in the bag is sustainable, that's coming out, and you're getting the aluminum bottles and different things like that, because how many of us have been at these events and you get your swag bag and it gets left behind in your hotel, and you always say it's because I don't have room in my suitcase, and it's just because there was nothing in it that you wanted. So that's been the biggest trend that we've been seeing.
Okay. And Titus, what are your buyers telling you, and how's Hilton responding?
I mean, first of all, what Ryan said, obviously fully agree with the perspective. It's no longer a choice, right? It's, I think those hotels that haven't figured that out yet probably won't join this conference next year, because those hotels might not exist anymore if they're corporate hotels. It's just, we're way beyond that. It's optional to have. And I think what our buyers are telling us, it has to be genuine, and it has to be consistent, and it has to be thought through. A good example that we had was, so in Hilton we have, like every other big hospitality chain, a lot of goals and targets to hit certain sustainability objectives. But a simple example, right? Great to have glass bottles. Not so great when these glass bottles arrive downstairs at the Conrad, and thankfully they don't anymore, wrapped in plastic, right? And then someone has to unwrap that single-use plastic. So we're thinking it through the whole supply chain, and it's not easy, especially at the size of operation we run. Our Conrad here is a big conference hotel, so it does take a bit of a holistic view, and I think as an industry we're missing a certain certification standard. We have the ICV. Anyone heard of ICV here in Dubai? Can I see a show of hands? Who knows what ICV is? Yeah, that's exactly the problem. So in-country value is not about plastic, but it's about local community, sourcing products locally. And a lot of companies are very particular about that, especially here doing business in the UAE. And that is a standard, right? So that is a certification process to get that in-country value certification. It's not easy to get, but I would encourage everyone to have a look at it. And that's what buyers look at, right? And that's what you can tell them if, let's say, an international consultancy comes. You can tell them, what is ICV? In addition, we offset every meeting when it comes to carbon emissions. So even this meeting today here, please let you know that it's carbon neutral, because Hilton is actually paying for that. And we have a meeting impact calculator where you as a customer can tell us your meeting parameters, and we'll tell you based on how much lighting you have and AC, what is the carbon emission, and then we offset that to no additional cost to the customer. So that's being very well received, but I think it's a competition, and the more we compete about being better at this, the better it is for the planet, right? Ultimately, it's not about corporate profits in that sense. It's more about, making some changes together. And we have a big responsibility, all of us in the room here, I think, with the number of hotel rooms we look at and look after. Just changing a little process somewhere, getting rid of those single-use coffee capsules and maybe replacing them with biodegradable. That's 100,000 capsules a year. So those ideas, I think, we need to keep stimulating, and that's why it's great to to live in these times where we can make these changes in the roles we have. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to build on that, because you said something about being genuine, and it's great. I love your program that you're doing. But to make sure, and this is going to seem like the weirdest thing, to make sure that's being lived everywhere in the hotel, because it's one thing to say that you're reducing the single plastic use, but then you go into your hotel room and there in the garbage can is a plastic bag, and not like the biodegradable, like a real plastic bag. So making sure that you've taken that step through all the rooms.
End to end.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. So it's critical, it's not optional. I want to get to one more question before the clock beats us. So you're only each going to have about 25 seconds on this. But I want to fast forward 10 years and just get some quick thoughts from you about how we're going to be handling business travel in the future. What does it look like? Are we still even traveling to conduct business, or is it all virtual? Are we still doing RFPs for lengthy periods of the year? I'm going to start at that end. We haven't spoken to Cem for the last few questions, but Cem, any thoughts from your side about the future of business travel? 20 seconds, boom.
Well, 10 years is long, but what I'm seeing, the business travel will still happen, my personal feeling, because it's a human element. It's very hard to take it out. There is no, especially on the sales or on the employee contact, face to face. It's nothing can replace to human touch. That's my feeling.
Titus.
RFP process lasting less than 6 months, every 6 months would be fantastic, and maybe a rolling RFP process if the buyers are in agreement. But I think technological enhancements will be that big next thing. We are overdue for that. I'm looking at the same process that I learned when I started in the industry 20 years ago. So clearly the next 10 don't look too promising. But I also think disruptors, people who will, or companies that will start tapping into travel, corporate travel, that are today not in that space, and whoever those may be, a bit like the Airbnb of future IBT travel, corporate travel. So I think those two things, and then as you know, we're partnering with Voyager Space, so reaching for the stars and building the first, the Space Lab, which is the successor to the ISS, and hopefully we'll welcome the first Abbott customer at Space Lab one day. I'm not sure that's 10 years range, but
maybe 15.
We're working on it.
Yeah. Christy.
So I'm probably the contrarian. Yes, business travel is always going to be around. I'm not 100% certain that most markets are going to get back to 2019 levels. And I believe inside individual corporate segments, it's never going to return. I think technology is one of those industries that these are people that are adept at using the internet to do things, and they're perfectly comfortable on Zoom sessions. So I think that's one of those segments that may never return. So we're going to need to look within other segments to replace that particular business. But I do believe it may take us the full 10 years to get back to full recovery everywhere in the world.
Okay, Jakob?
Matthew, if you had to ask me this question in 2019, I would say we will have enormous travel for next 10 years. But after the COVID pandemic, we are certain of how the travel would be. And hopefully, if there's no other pandemic, I'm sure the travel will increase. It will increase more and more. Coming again to hybrid or virtual meetings, personally, I do not support virtual or hybrid meetings. When you do face-to-face meetings, there is something called as human touch. We miss that every time, right? You tend to create more relationship. You can put a face to the name of the person, right? What we have seen in past couple of months, I would say, after certain time, virtual meeting gets very boring. You see people, if you are in a group meeting, like 25, 30 people attending a meeting, you would see somebody switching off the camera. If that person is not talking on the call, you might not know if the person is there or not there, right? We just put on and we go. So it's a fact, everybody knows about it. So looking into all those pros and cons, I would say business travel will still increase. We would love to travel, and I think that's a need. That's a need of an hour, and future will be good. Yeah.
Okay, Ryan, bring us home.
So I'm looking at that clock winking at us. I'm going to keep it very short.
I'm trying not to make eye contact with Mona at this stage.
Business travel is not dead, and we need to get onto the net neutral carbon train to look after the next 10 years. I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. It was a really fascinating discussion. I feel that there's almost some conflicting trends that we see. There's been a seismic shift towards the use of technology, and that changes the way that we collaborate internally and externally. Yet it's still clear that face-to-face is a differentiator, and you've all come out and said that. It's certainly a differentiator when it comes to client engagement, and it drives motivation and engagement when we're talking about internal activity. And then, you look at the regional economics, and the regional economics in our region have led us to a point where a lot of our major business centers are at 2019 levels or above. So I think it's fair to say, if we revisit our title, business travel will never return, fact or fiction. I think, it's fiction, right? It's back, and it's back strong, and long may it reign. But guys, thank you very much to the panel, I think, one more time, and Gemma, back to you. Thank you.